Good morning. This is Chair French convening the regular business meeting of the Kansas Corporation Commission for February 5th, 2026, joined by my colleagues Commissioner Keen and Commissioner Keither. On today's agenda, we have a consent agenda consisting of 20 items. We have 3 noticed items, and then we will have 1 discussion item, a presentation from MRO. So with that, Commissioners, we will begin with our consent agenda. You've had the opportunity to review the 20 items on the consent agenda. Let me ask at this time if you have any questions, beginning with Commissioner Keither
No questions, thanks.
and Commissioner Keen.
None for me either. I would move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. The consent agenda is approved. We will now move to our noticed items. Our first noticed item is in docket number 25 CONS 3265 CWLE, and this is a proposed final order in that docket. Our presenter for this item is Mr. John Myers. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Chair French, and good morning, Commissioners. The final order before you grants the operator's amended application in this matter. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this item, beginning again with Commissioner Keither
No questions, thanks.
and Commissioner Keen?
No questions. I would move approval of the order.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to approve the order as described. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. The order is approved. We now move to our second noticed item. This is in docket number 25 CONS 3373 CPEN. And this is another proposed final order in this docket. And our presenter again is Mr. John Myers.
Commissioners, the final order in this case affirms the underlying penalty orders in these dockets. I am available for any questions.
All right, thank you, John. Any questions on this item, beginning again with Commissioner Keither
No questions.
and Commissioner Keen?
None for me either. I'd move approval of the order.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the order as described in this docket. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. The order is approved. Thank you, John. We will now go to our third and final noticed item. This is in docket number 26 HVDT 048 KSF. And this is a proposed order approving settlement in that docket. Our presenter for this item is Mr. Tristan Kimbrell. Good morning, Tristan.
Morning, thank you. On August 8th, 2025, Haviland Telephone Company filed an application to establish annual Kansas Universal Service Fund support. Haviland requested $1,387,380 in annual support. Commission staff reviewed Haviland's embedded costs, revenue requirements, investments, and expenses, and recommended setting Haviland's annual support at $968,175. On January 12th, Haviland and staff filed a joint motion to approve a settlement agreement. Under the proposed settlement agreement, Haviland's annual support would be established at $1,009,325, which would be reduced by $50,616 after 5 years. The settlement agreement proposed by Haviland staff is unanimous, and this order finds that the agreement is supported by substantial competent evidence, will result in just and reasonable rates, and is in the public interest. Thus, this order would approve the settlement agreement and establish Haviland's annual support effective March 1st, 2026. With that, I'm available for questions.
All right, thank you, Tristan. Are there any questions on this item, beginning again with Commissioner Keither
No questions, thanks.
and Commissioner Keen?
None for me either. I'd move approval of the order.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to approve the order as described in this docket. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. The order is approved. Thank you, Tristan. With that, we have come to our final agenda item. This is a discussion item, but it is actually a presentation by the Midwest Reliability Organization. And our presenter today, it looks like we may have a couple, but the presenter I've got noted is Mr. Will Seifert. I hope I got close on that. who is the Director of Regulatory Affairs for MRO. And Will, I will just go ahead and turn it over to you. I don't know if you've got a slide deck that you are running or we are running. I think you have the ability to share, but I'll turn it over to you at this time to make your presentation.
Right. Thank you, Chair French. If you could just bear with me, I'm going to share my screen there. We know. Can you see it all right?
We do see it.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thanks so much for your time this morning. For the record, my name is Will Seufert. I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs at MRO. I joined the company about 6 months ago. Prior to that, I spent about 20 years in Minnesota state government, most recently as the Executive Secretary for the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. So I have a keen appreciation for the hard work that you all do, and really value your time and appreciate it this morning. So I'll turn it over to my colleague, Brian, to introduce himself as well.
Sure. Thank you, Will. Brian Clark, I'm Director of Reliability Analysis at MRO. I actually was involved in a presentation some years ago to the Kansas Corporation Commission, so it's good to be back and sharing some updated information with you guys. But I've been with MRO for 8 years now, started in 2018, and prior to that I was with Southwest Power Pool for around 8 years. My background is engineering, so again, excited to share this information with you guys, and I'm hopeful that it's helpful to you.
Welcome back, Brian, and welcome, Will.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll get started. We're going to cover a short little overview about MRO here, but spend the bulk of our time talking about our reliability assessments, some of our recently published assessments, and then we'll, time permitting, talk a little bit about our regional risk assessment, which we're scheduled to publish in February, and then close out with some updates on status updates on some NERC initiatives and resources that could be useful to you all. All right, so I just want to start with our mission. Our mission and vision revolve around a secure and reliable North American bulk power system. And I offer that context knowing that you all have to balance that with a lot of other things: affordability, state policy, community impact, et cetera. We have the luxury of being able to just speak to the reliability leg of the stool. So a little bit about MRO. We are a nonprofit. We are not a government entity, though our authority, our regulatory authority, stems from federal law. We are headquartered in St. Paul, Minnesota, about 80 employees. Most of our employees are former utility employees, RTO employees, grid operators, so a lot of industry expertise in MRO. And as I noted about our nonprofit status, our authority comes from a delegation agreement with NERC that is approved by FERC. And as a nonprofit, we don't advocate for or against policy or intervene in docketed matters, but we do have an educational mission. And so that's why we're reaching out to commissions and legislative entities in our footprint. So a little bit about the history of MRO. Our roots go back to 2003. The Northeast blackout was a cascading event that impacted over 50 million people from New York City to Toronto. Congress shortly thereafter passed the Energy Policy Act, and there were two pieces of that. One was establishing enforceable electric reliability standards. Standards did exist prior to that, but they were voluntary, and so this created a mandatory structure for electric reliability standards. And then it also created the Electric Reliability Organization. In 2006, FERC designated the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, as the ERO. And then 1 year later, NERC delegated authority to 8 regional entities to monitor and enforce compliance. And so there's been some consolidation since then, and we are one of 6 regions currently that operate under the ERO umbrella. So another way of kind of looking at our structure, I'm going to oversimplify this a little bit, but with respect to our regulatory authority and the electric reliability standards, NERC drafts the standards, FERC approves the standards, the regions monitor and enforce the standards, and the registered entities, which are your transmission owners and operators, generation owners and operators, your RTOs, they ultimately implement those standards. And so you can see here our region. It spans from Saskatchewan and Manitoba into parts of Texas. You'll note the boundaries don't neatly follow political boundaries or RTO boundaries even. They are, the boundaries are the physical assets of the registered entities that are MRO members. About 27 million people depend on reliable power in this footprint. And just another way of understanding kind of where our jurisdiction ends and yours, and yours exists is we oversee the operations on the bulk power system. So you can see that on the left, that is transmission, large substations, generation, anything over 100 kV, and then everything else is distribution system that falls under state and provincial regulation. What I like about this slide, though, is it really kind of reinforces that reliability is a team sport. Your customers don't care if their outage is caused by a downed tree on a distribution line or a cascading event on the bulk power system. At the end of the day, they just want reliable power. So we do want to make sure that we are a partner in doing that. I've touched on some of these, and we're going to talk about reliability here shortly, so I'm not going to highlight all of these responsibilities, but the one I wanted to call out, since I don't have any slides on it, is critical infrastructure security. We are part of the EISAC, but we also convene a weekly threat call with our members in our footprint. That is especially valuable for information sharing, particularly for the smaller utilities that don't have the sophisticated detection systems. It's an opportunity for them on a regular basis to get updates from other utilities on threats and responses, et cetera. Okay, so a little bit about reliability and performance and our assessments. I want to dive into this a little bit now because, as you probably are aware, our assessments are attracting the attention, the increasing attention of federal and state policymakers. So the Federal Power Act requires the ERO to perform reliability and adequacy assessments of the bulk power system in North America. So this requirement is fulfilled by the publication of 3 separate assessments. The first assessment on here is the Long-Term Reliability Assessment, the LTRA. This is an annual publication by NERC. It is a 10-year look ahead, and it assesses risk for the first 5 years. And it is a broad look at North America's electric system adequacy and reliability. We work in partnership with NERC to collect and verify and analyze the data, and ultimately NERC publishes this report. Then the 2 seasonal assessments underneath there, the Winter Reliability Assessment and the Summer Reliability Assessment, are 3-month assessments that we publish specific to the upcoming seasonal demand. They are forward-looking. NERC publishes a seasonal assessment, and then we publish our own assessment that dives a little bit deeper into past performance within our region. And then the other assessment that I want to flag here is the Regional Risk Assessment. This is an annual publication that we put out that helps to prioritize a broad range of reliability and security risks that are identified by our members, and helps to prioritize our focus and response. So let's jump into the NERC Winter Reliability Assessment. So this slide is taken from the NERC WRA. So the assessment found that while all areas are assessed as having adequate resources for normal winter peak load conditions, more extreme winter conditions extending over a wide area could result in electricity supply shortfalls in some regions. The good news here, as you can see, is in this picture, is that the MRO region, which includes SPP, is normal risk. But the reason I have this slide up is I did want to highlight a Across the continent, electricity demand has grown by 20 gigawatts since last year, but total bulk power system resources have only increased by 9.4 gigawatts. So this shrinking margin is a trend we see in some of our assessments. So shifting then to the MRO winter reliability assessment. So for the first time in several years, sufficient resources were forecast to be available to meet operating reserve requirements under extreme peak demand, coupled with extreme weather conditions. The chart on top shows the reserve margin percentage with typical outages and extreme peak load. The chart on bottom looks at the reserve margin with extreme resource derates and extreme peak load. This change in expected resource availability is due to an increase in resource availability in SPP and MISO, and a decrease in extreme resource derates and anticipated forced outages from improved winter performance. And my colleague Brian's going to talk a little bit about the winter performance shortly. But since we just had Winter Storm Fern, I do want to go back to we do have some data from Winter Storm Fern to compare against the WRA projections. As you can see in the chart, the projected extreme peak load for SPP in the winter assessment was 48,435 megawatts. The highest peak load recorded for SPP on the evening of January 25 was about 43,000 megawatts, and the highest peak recorded in SPP on the morning of January 26 was just under 46,000 megawatts. Both were under the WRA projection. So there were no EEAs issued in SPP for this event. So we do applaud SPP and the entities in the footprint for their performance during this significant winter storm. And I'm going to turn it over to Brian now to discuss winter performance in the generator winterization program.
Thank you, Will. So Will just highlighted the NERC winter reliability assessment and then also covered some points on the MRO seasonal assessment for the winter. I'm going to dig into some of the performance analysis related to the winter season. So that's the advantage of the MRO assessment, is that we not only look at the seasonal forecast, but we also take a look at previous performance across the footprint. And three areas in particular that are covered on this slide would be generation availability, transmission availability, and then any misoperations associated with the transmission system. The first chart shows the generator weighted equivalent forced outage rate for conventional generation in the MRO footprint. We continue to see a slight increase in this rate over the years, and that can mainly be attributed to component fatigue and aging fleet. We are operating our conventional resources in a different way now that we have such a large number of renewable resources on the grid, and we're seeing the impacts of that with starting and stopping units that, you know, in the past were running nonstop for base load purposes. We do expect the 2025 outage rates to decrease as more data is collected, since the current data represents the most impactful portion of the year. So for this chart, we only have Q1 of 2025. We collect a lot of this information quarterly, and then there's analysis after the fact, so it takes time to put it together. And this was from our winter assessment that we published back in November of 2025. The next area, or the chart on the slide, covers the misoperations rate for the MRO footprint over the past 5 years. Misoperations are defined as a failure of the bulk electric system protection system to operate as intended for protection purposes. This can be through the operation of a breaker to isolate a fault or other types of disturbances. So basically anything that the system's doing that you don't expect it to do or you don't want it to do, that would be considered a misoperation. This rate is calculated by dividing the misoperations by the total number of operations. And we saw a very impactful decrease from 2023 to 2024, as you can see across our footprint, where we went from 8.1% misoperation rate to a 6.11% misoperation rate in 2024. And this is the lowest we've seen in 5 years. And, you know, that has come with working with entities across our region. You know, we obviously can't take all of the credit, but there's a lot of work that MRO does to help share lessons learned and also analyze these events as they occur. And we like to think that what we're doing has been helping as we see this trend lower the past few years.
Hey, Brian,
last-
just a clarifying question on the misoperation rates. Is that for transmission facilities, or is that also related to generation facilities?
It's just transmission, so
Okay,
that
that's
is
what
a
I
good
thought.
question. Yes.
Yep.
Yep, thanks. The last graph at the bottom covers the transmission availability for all major voltage levels from 100 kV to 500 kV. And you can see that this improved during the 2024-2025 winter season. And that is our focus area as MRO. We are concerned about the bulk power system, which is mainly the bulk electric system. Anything above 100 kV, those are the transmission lines that we trend and monitor. And again, we haven't seen this trend in the past 5 years. So the fact that the outages are going in a downward direction is a good thing. And most of the outages that we saw during the 2024-2025 winter season occurred during 2 storms in the MRO region, one in December of 2024 and the other in January of 2025. Advance to the next slide, please. So quickly wanted to touch on the MRO generator winterization program. We're all aware of the challenges that we face during extreme cold weather and some of the storms that we've seen over the years that have impacted generator availability. We just got through mentioning Winter Storm Fern and some of the impacts that had on the system. So in 2021, MRO started up our generator winterization program, and this is completely separate from our compliance monitoring and enforcement area. This is not considered a compliance engagement. I'm always want to make sure I emphasize that, and it does not involve any auditors. These are voluntary site visits that support bulk power system reliability. Utilities have the option to participate in a survey rather than an on-site visit. But we encourage on-site visits because it gives the plant operators an opportunity to interact with MRO staff. With the on-site visits, we also provide the entity with a confidential report, and this report covers recommendations that we might have, areas for improvement, as well as best practices that we've captured. And we've actually performed, I believe, at least 2, maybe 3 different sites in the state of Kansas. Entities in Kansas have been very forthcoming and willing to participate in the program, which is great. I just want to end with the program is a great way for MRO to share lessons learned during cold weather operations across our entire region. You can see on the map stretching from the Canadian provinces of Saskatchewan and Manitoba down to North Texas, very different operation practices across our footprint. So anything that we can learn from our entities up north and take that back to our down south entities is a great thing. I think that's back to you now.
Okay, so we're going to shift gears to the LTRA. So the next 5 slides are taken from the 2025 NERC Long-Term Reliability Assessment. NERC's 2025 LTRA spotlights intensifying resource adequacy risks throughout the North American bulk power system over the next 10 years. As you know, the LTRA was published just last week on January 29th. You've probably seen this image on social media or in the industry trade press. Please keep in mind, this is a projection. This is not a prediction. This image categorizes the risk level for each planning area of the continent. The assessment is determined by 2 separate inputs: a comparison of anticipated resources to the reference margin level established by each of the RTOs, and an all-hours probabilistic assessment for years 2027 and 2029. Uncertainty and lag in the pace of new resource additions are driving heightened concerns as the industry plans for ascending electricity demand from new data centers and large loads. So this slide underscores an overarching theme in the assessment. There is a sharp rise in projected demand. This is not a new story, but you can see here how quickly this demand is rising. The summer's 10-year forecast is up 69% from last year's LTRA, and the winter 10-year forecast is up 50% from last year's LTRA. The chart on the right shows how the demand forecasts are being revised upwards each year. For your reference, these demand forecasts are aggregates of the individual forecasts provided by planning entities and LSEs. And to be counted in load forecasting, data center projects have advanced from speculative and exploratory stages into development commitments necessary to drive grid planning studies.
Mhm.
So at the same time as demand forecasts are growing, actual resource capacity, both variable and non-variable, in addition to Tier 1 resources, continue to fall behind the previous year's projections. In other years, we're over-projecting the resources that are actually showing up. This is being addressed by expedited resource addition processes in SPP and other RTOs. However, that data was not available at the time the 2025 LTRA models were run, so it doesn't show up in these risk assessments. It'll show up in the 2026 LTRA. The graphic on the right highlights the extent and pace of supply growth in both the summer and the winter needed to meet demand over the next decade. Timely infrastructure development is a risk identified in the LTRA. Growth is threatened by supply chain, interconnection process, and approval delays. All right, Brian, you want to take this?
Yeah,
Yep.
all right. So just want to dig a little bit into the SPP assessment area.
If you could excuse
and
me. This is Dwight Keene. Could we go back 2 slides briefly? One more. Back. Yes. It strikes me here, it just jumps out that Texas has its own problems, but that the largest problems are either PJM or MISO.
Mhm.
With respect to our neighbors here to the east with MISO, what would you say were the primary causes for their higher level of risk?
Sure, that's a great question, Commissioner Keene. I can't speak to PJM, but we can speak a little bit to MISO. So mathematically, the reason that MISO shows up on red is in the deterministic analysis where we compare anticipated resources to the margin. In 2028, they're showing a deficiency. And the reason they're showing that deficiency is because of projected retirements of thermal resources and the pace of replacement resources that are not anticipated to come on. Now,
I appreciate that.
You bet.
Pardon my interruption. Please continue.
I'll just say in fairness to MISO, like SPP, they have fast-tracked through ERIS about 20 gigawatts of new gas generation that is not part of that calculation because it was approved after the models were run. But it's still, I will say, and this is a risk that we don't just see in MISO, but we see throughout the continent, there is a lot of new gas that's being planned. And one of the risks that we need to be mindful of is the ability to quickly interconnect those resources to meet the growing demand. But thank you for the question. I'll go back to the SPP slide unless any other questions.
I have a follow-up.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay. To what extent are these risk factors attributable to an aggressive, I'm going to paraphrase you here, retirement of the thermal resources without adequate substitution for other forms of generation?
It's a great question. And, Brian, feel free to comment if you have comments. That contributes to it. I mean, that certainly MRO and NERC have been saying for a number of years, based on past assessments, that we need to carefully manage the pace of retirements. And so with all of the impending retirements that have been approved and are on the horizon, the ability to replace them with firm dispatchable resources on the same timeline is going to contribute to the level of risk. So what's driving that looks different in every state and in every utility service territory. But at the end of the day, it's a math challenge. And how do you get those resources on to make sure that you are replacing the thermal resources that are scheduled to retire? But that is compounded by the demand forecasts that are taking what was a challenge and making it look more like an emergency.
A brief follow-up yet again, and I should be finished with this and we can move on. To what extent is the problematic concerns that are within the MISO and the Great Lakes area attributable to state mandated zero emission target goals?
It's a great question, Commissioner. Our analysis just looks at the numbers broadly that are compiled by MISO. So we don't have a state-by-state analysis that can tell you specifically what state policies are driving which of those actions. But I can say a number of those states do have decarbonization requirements, and they're in different stages of implementing them.
Okay, I have a follow-up, but I'll let you off the hook. I appreciate your answers to my questions here. Please move on. Thank you.
Well, I do have a question here on that map. This is Annie Keither. To follow with Dwight's questions, especially in the Great Lakes, they had retirements in place that the federal government has now overseen and mandated to stay in place. What kind of issues are you developing with that kind of change?
Commissioner, great question. From a reliability standpoint, I would share that there's about 1,000 megawatts in the MISO footprint of emergency ordered power, right? These are different units in Indiana and Michigan that have operated beyond their approved lifespan for the purposes of emergency power. The states in the footprint would tell you that there are concerns pertaining to affordability and who pays for those facilities, but that's kind of out of our lane. I would say from a reliability standpoint, we are tracking that and are aware of it, because when we publish future assessments, we also need to be mindful of we're looking at the data that we're getting from the RTOs that are expecting those facilities to retire, and then they're actually staying on. So we want to make sure that our calculations are accurate if this trend is going to continue over a number of years.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet. All right, so we'll go back to the SPP slide. I'm happy to go back if other questions come up. So.
No, these are great questions, and I appreciate the engagement. I'll add that throughout the long-term reliability assessment report, we do cover some of these things that were just mentioned. You talk about state policies, yes, that has an impact. You talk about retirements, yes, that has an impact. You talk about demand forecast increasing. All of those things are very impactful, and we do touch on that in the long-term reliability assessment. So thank you for asking. So just maybe highlighting the SPP assessment area a little more within the long-term reliability assessment. In general, the SPP assessment area looks good in terms of capacity against reference margin level, as well as their loss of load hours with the LTRA analysis and the expected unserved energy across the 10-year time frame in the probabilistic assessments. They don't fall below the reserve margin level until year 2032 in the 10-year assessment. However, the NERC seasonal assessments have projected SPP with lower planned reserves and a similar resource mix with more weather-dependent resources, and we're all familiar with the SPP's resource makeup. That puts them at an elevated risk in the LTRA starting in 2026, and that's where we had them in the map. And just to maybe explain a little bit more about what is an elevated risk. What does that really mean? This is when the assessment area may face challenges under extreme load conditions. So under normal conditions, SPP looks good. It's when you get to that extreme load condition that you might face some challenges, especially with the resource makeup. The high level definition of that, again, just when you get to that extreme load. As noted on the slide, the projected SPP peak internal demand is 65,902 megawatts, and this is during year 2035, so the end of the 10-year assessment. This is a 16% increase to the all-time summer peak for SPP. So just to give you an idea of the type of increase that we're looking at, across a 10-year time frame is pretty significant. You can go to the next slide.
Could we go back to that slide for just a second
sure.
for one question? I'm sorry. So this is Chair French. Just want to ask a question on how you all think about transmission planning in this context. A lot of these assessments focuses really on the resource adequacy side, and just sort of that calculation of projected generation to meet demand and what PRMs are going to be. But if you're following SPP and the other regions, I mean, they're all talking about large build outs of additional transmission to meet the projected demand increases. I mean, in SPP, it's a 765 overlay plus a good amount of 345, and it's kind of the same in the other large regions. How do you all think about that in this context? Is it just the failure to take that action could potentially drive reserve margins even higher and generation needs even higher? Or how does that play into the long-term reliability assessment?
So I'll say that NERC and the regions are strong supporters of transmission, and we provided a lot more information on transmission in the most recent interregional transfer capability study that was published in 2024, and then the Canadian analysis in 2025. So that is something that can help with a lot of the challenges that we're facing. And to your point, we don't get into that as much in the LTRA. Transmission is mentioned, and we are fully aware that with these different assessment areas, the more transmission capability you have between them, the better off you are in being able to move power. And I know that the state of Kansas is actually moving forward with a few transmission projects. I think you guys just energized the 345 kV line from your nuclear power plant, Wolf Creek. So that's great that you guys are moving those projects forward. We also recognize the challenges that you face with transmission being approved and the right-of-ways, and then getting the construction completed is typically a 10 to sometimes 15-year process, which a whole different set of challenges in that as well. Not really sure if I'm answering your question, but I am maybe giving you some insight as to how we look at transmission as the ERO enterprise.
Yeah, no, that helps. I think it's helpful to understand that these risk assessments are really focused on the current state of things, projected resource additions, projected demand, but the grid basically as it stands. But grid additions, upgrades, this is just in my mind, those are going to ultimately feed into future risk assessments. So if the grid becomes more robust in the future, that might ease some pressures, but that's not necessarily taken into account here. At least that's my understanding.
And there are enhancements on the way to our LTRA study. In 2027, we'll publish the 2026 LTRA, and we will include transfer capability portion as well as an energy analysis, because we recognize that the way we've been looking at the system is is okay, but with the changing resource mix, we need to dig a little bit deeper and go beyond capacity. There's more to the story than just, hey, your capacity's here and your demand's here, so you should be good. We're at this point now more concerned about energy, and do you have the fuel to get that energy to where the demand is? So great questions, and we are looking at ways to enhance the LTRA so that we can consider some more of those different things that are impacting reliability.
Yeah, the transmission planning definitely drills farther down that, you know, they want to make sure the energy is deliverable
Mhm.
at all times. And they, you know, when they see the coming you know, demand explosion, and if we don't upgrade the grid, I mean, they're certainly telling us, you know, we're going to have reliability problems. We're going to have, you know, thermal violations all over the place, which then you all would be very concerned about that. But that's sort of a future state, and um, you know, it isn't just that view of, you know, is there enough generation sort of on the grid to meet it? It's, you know, is it deliverable? Does the system does the, you know, does the power flow actually work at that point? So, well, that's really helpful. I just wanted some context of how transmission fit in. So that's
Yeah,
helpful.
thank you. Transmission helps. We support it, and you know, we have studies out there that say that. So I can definitely point you to those.
Yeah, and thanks for raising the question, Chair French. And while we didn't add it to our slides, there is some information in the LTRA on transmission as well. I mean, first off, firm transfers are part of the calculation for the resource mix. And as Brian noted, we are piloting additional analysis for future LTRA. But I do want to also point out, of the nearly 900 projects that were under construction or in planning for the next 10 years, this is across the continent, at least 390 projects have been delayed from the originally expected in-service dates. So the challenges we see, right, with bringing generation online are certainly, they're there with transmission as well. So, all right, I'm going to pivot here to recommendations. You can see there's two that I think are just, we've touched on them a little bit or touched on one, but I just want to call your attention to these since they're specific to regulators and policymakers. And that first one is on streamlining siting and permitting to remove barriers. You know, there's a lot of resources that we need to bring online, and our ability to do that efficiently is going to impact our ability to maintain a reliable bulk power system. The other piece I want to flag here is continued collaboration with the gas industry. So 13 out of 23 planning areas are reporting to add net new gas-fired capacity over the next 10 years. So as the resource mix becomes more dependent on natural gas to provide both energy and essential reliability services, system planners must account for the potential unavailability of this capacity due to infrastructure limitations, pipeline constraints, and delivery issues. And I do believe that Commissioner Keene was on the NARUC GEAR task force, so I do want to also recognize his service there, and that's certainly an area that should continue to get a lot of focus as we move forward. Okay, Brian mentioned this, but this slide highlights the changes that you can expect to see in the LTRA going forward. These analyses are being performed this year as a pilot and will be part of the 2026 LTRA. They're designed to provide greater precision in risk assessments, shifting away from a capacity-based assessment to an energy-based assessment. Through an interconnection-wide energy assessment and a transfer adequacy assessment, we will be able to better identify constraints so decision makers can best mitigate risks. And future changes are also being planned to consider reliability services and risk scenarios. And then before I turn it back over to Brian, I do want to flag, if you're interested in a deeper dive on the SPP system and the other planning areas in MRO, we're going to have a webinar on March 3rd, and I can share information on that after the meeting. Okay, Brian.
So how are we on time? Are we?
Yeah, Chair French, how are we on time? We can
I think
calibrate our
we're
comments.
good. We have allotted all the way till 11 o'clock. So we've got another 15 minutes. So, yeah, depending on how many slides you have, speed up or slow down. I think we're getting our questions out of the way as you go, so I don't know that we need to leave a lot of time on the back end.
Okay, thanks. And I'll try to pick up the pace with these next couple of
Okay.
slides and maybe allow us some more time. And I failed to mention, actually, one of the recommendations that were on the screen previously were around transmission and resources and how, regulators can help with siting and the permitting process to quickly get those things approved. So the regional risk assessment, we've talked about the long-term reliability assessment, we talked about seasonal assessments, and now we're moving into our regional risk assessment, which is an MRO product. It's very high level, where we look across the MRO region to determine what is impacting reliability and what are the things that we need to be taking action on to try to mitigate. These risks are higher level, again, based on the data we collect, trends and inputs from entities or utilities. The process involves identifying the risk, prioritizing the risk, and validating the risk. The prioritization and validation take place during the risk ranking workshop, where we invite advisory council members in to discuss and rank the risk using our reliability risk matrix. We use the risk matrix to determine the likelihood and consequence or impact of the risk. So we have a guiding document to help us determine, is this a low risk, a medium risk, a high risk, or an extreme risk? You can go to the next slide. So from the 2025 regional risk assessment, these are the top 6 risks. Number 1, extreme risk, was uncertain energy availability. And this has been an extreme risk for 2 years straight. And I won't spill the beans on if it's still extreme for 2026. I'll let you wait and see what we have to say when we publish that in the next few weeks. But this is basically, us looking at the replacement of conventional generation and weather-dependent generation and the rising electricity demand. So taking all those things into account, we see this as an extreme risk, and also the trends and history that contribute to the likelihood, including firm load shedding events and the issuing of energy emergency alerts. We saw, I believe, 3 different firm load shedding events in the MRO region last year. Most of them were in the SPP region. And I know some of those, the explanation was they were load pockets and it was a local area issue. But, the reality is with more generation or more transmission to get into that area, it might have been able to, we could have avoided that possibly. So we're seeing these trends, we're seeing these events that justify us having uncertain energy availability as an extreme risk. You can advance to the next slide. I think that's you to close it out.
Yep. Okay. Oh, I advanced too many slides. Great. Okay. Here, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to flag some initiatives that NERC is leading right now and resources to you all going forward. The first is the Large Loads Task Force, which I think has been recently renamed the Large Loads Working Group. This was convened by NERC to better understand the reliability impacts of emerging large loads. While they're looking at forecasting, they're also, most of the focus is on the operational side to identify gaps and mitigation of potential risks. Large loads are inverter-based, like IBRs and just variable energy resources. This is likely a precursor to standards, reliability standards being developed and applied to large loads that interconnect on the bulk power system to ensure that there aren't any operational issues that would impact the reliability of the system. There's an inverter-based resource registration initiative. So this was ordered by FERC about 3 years ago, and this is the final year of this registration initiative. But this is getting at challenges of increasing large amounts of inverter-based resources. That's solar, wind, battery. I'm not an electrical engineer, but think about it as anything that connects to the grid via a computer as opposed to a spinning mass. We have to have different standards to make sure that we're protecting the equipment of the grid and they're not tripping when there are voltage fluctuations. So This registration initiative applies to facilities as low as 20 kV. So it's capturing more facilities than are typically understood as part of the bulk electric system. And because they're not all utility-owned projects, we're also having to connect with generation owners that haven't had to work with NERC before. So it's been a bit of an education and outreach initiative, but it's coming together and being completed yet this year. Wildfire mitigation. I know this is an increasingly challenging topic for a lot of Midwestern states. FERC directed NERC to put together a report on best practices. That's coming out on May 1st. There was a technical workshop last week, but we hope that this report is something that is useful to you and the utilities that operate in Kansas as they think about wildfire. And then the last thing on here is the Planning Energy Assurance Standard. I don't believe that SPP filed comments, but most of the MISO states did file comments expressing concerns about the Planning Energy Assurance Standard. So I just wanted to update you all. This standard was developed to require all of the resource planning entities and transmission planning entities to do an annual energy assurance study. And if they identify any deficiencies, to bring those to the attention in the form of a corrective action plan to their applicable regulatory authorities. And concerns were expressed by some states that was a jurisdictional overreach by NERC, and so the ballot did not get enough support to pass. But NERC is working with stakeholders to try to find a way to make sure that this standard can move forward in some fashion, because we do want to make sure that there is consistent planning processes and methodologies across the continent, so we can really understand where those deficiencies show up at all hours. So that pretty much wraps up what we were going to cover. I do want to point out we do have an upcoming annual grid summit in Omaha on May 12th and 13th. We do bring together hundreds of utility stakeholders at this event, and we hope to see maybe some of you all in Omaha here in a couple months. So that ends my comments, but I'm happy to pause to see if you have any questions.
Great presentation. Thank you so much for the information. Let me just pause here then to see if there are any final questions or comments from either the commissioners, or I know we have our Director of Utilities, Justin Grady, is on the telephone. Any final questions or comments for our presenters?
I've got one, Chair French. My background is legislative, so there's a bit of a slant here. But is there anything that you can bring or do take to local legislative bodies to educate them on different aspects of what you do? Because, I mean, there are, I don't know about any other states besides Kansas, but the Kansas legislature certainly is interested in getting involved in making decisions that could impact what gets done or doesn't get done in the state of Kansas, and not necessarily for the better, because they don't know as much as they should. And I'm speaking from experience here. So I just wonder if there's any educational presentation on a limited source that could be beneficial to the state.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Great question. That's actually partly why my department and my role was created, to further outreach to states and provinces, both regulators as well as policymakers. And so we are just getting started in this work, and we do welcome the opportunity to reach out to your legislative colleagues to offer similar presentations, because while we're nonprofit, we can't advocate for policies. We can't say you should or shouldn't pass this certain piece of legislation. We do want to make sure that we are educating decision makers about what reliability on the bulk power system looks like.
I think that would be really fabulous. We're out of time in the Kansas legislature already this session, but I would certainly advocate for a presentation for the educational benefit it would bring. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for you, Will, but I'm sure you'll agree. We're happy to do that. If you have contacts that you want to put us in touch with, let us know. If you, again, pointing back to the long-term reliability assessment, there's an area in their report that mentions, strong partnerships and how as the ARO enterprise want to work closely with state commissioners and other regulators to help inform them and educate them. So this is in alignment with our strategy and with some of these things that we're moving forward with. So thank you.
Great, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Yeah. And we do have strong relationships with our legislative leadership, particularly in the utilities committees, and would be happy to put you in touch. I think they'd be, they do hear quite often from the electric utilities, transmission owners. The Southwest Power Pool usually comes about once a year. I think they'd be very interested to hear sort of about where you all fit in and your role as compared to somebody like the regional operator. Your role under NERC, I think they'd be very interested to hear what that is. So thank you very much. Commissioner Keen, I see you're off mute. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't. But I would thank the presenters for the presentation. It's very very enlightening, very helpful, and thank you for your time.
All
Thank
right.
you all. Really appreciate it.
Anything additional from other KCC folks? All right, hearing nothing, yes, I'll add my 2 cents. Thank you so much for the presentation. We do value the exchange of this information, and hopefully we can continue doing this, annually or every couple of years, get together and hear what the outlook is for our region. So very, very helpful to put this together with the information we get. Of course, go to a lot of SPP meetings, but it's good to put this information together and see the bigger picture. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you for your time.
All right. With that, we are back on our agenda, and that was the final agenda item for our business meeting today. So if there is nothing further to come before us this morning, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I think I saw a second, even though Commissioner Keen is on mute. I was reading lips.
You did, in fact. Sorry.
We've got a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Fine.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.